Some cities in Europe sound like great places to visit until you actually get there. In this video, I'm going to show you 7 large and famous European cities that honestly aren't really worth your time, and where to go instead. Some of these might surprise you, and a few might even be a little controversial, but I'll explain exactly why for each one. I'm Rogers from PriceOfTravel.com, and let's get started. Let's start with Zurich, Switzerland. A simple shortcut when planning a trip to Europe is to pick a country and then focus on the largest city for your first visit, but in a few cases that can actually lead you astray. Zurich is lovely. It's set on a scenic river and lake, it's very well organized, it's incredibly expensive, and honestly it's kind of boring, with almost no must-see sights. If you visit Zurich, you'll probably be impressed, but you'd be much better off skipping it and focusing on 2 other areas, because Switzerland has some of the most beautiful scenery on the planet, and it's not in Zurich. The Interlaken area, especially the Lauterbrunnen Valley, looks like one giant tourism postcard, with dramatic mountain peaks, waterfalls, and even tiny farms where cattle wear those traditional bells. My favorite place is the tiny village of Gimmelwald, but honestly you'd be amazed by almost anywhere in that valley. The other great option, especially if you have 4 or 5 days, is the Lucerne area. The city itself is gorgeous and there are several incredible mountain peaks nearby that you can reach by cable car or scenic train. Not only are these areas some of the most beautiful places in Europe, they're also a bit cheaper than Zurich, although to be fair, nothing in Switzerland is cheap. Next up is Brussels, and this one is a bit similar to Zurich, but with one key difference. In this case, I do actually recommend stopping here for at least a few hours before moving on, and that's easy to do because so many train routes between major cities pass through Brussels anyway. My uncle has lived in Brussels for over 40 years, and I've visited several times, but to me, once you've spent some time in the incredible Grand Place, which really is one of Europe's most beautiful town squares, your time is probably better spent elsewhere. Brussels is very much a business and government city, so a lot of things are on the expensive side and there just aren't that many standout sights. Once you've seen the Grand Place and maybe the famous Mannequin Piss on a quick walkthrough, you've covered most of what people come for. So instead of staying longer, I'd hop back on the train and spend a couple of days in Bruges, which is far more photogenic and visitor-friendly. Or if you're traveling in peak summer, Ghent is a great alternative, similar vibe but with fewer tourists. Both of these smaller cities are easier to enjoy and much less hectic, so unless you're actually in Brussels for business, they're usually the better choice. So Brussels is worth a stop, it's just not really worth a stay. And by the way, if you're finding this helpful, feel free to hit the like button. It really helps more people find these videos. Next up is Dublin, and this one might be a bit controversial because a lot of people love Dublin. But the thing is, compared to the rest of Ireland, Dublin can feel a bit underwhelming, and definitely overpriced. On my first visit, I spent a few days in Dublin and honestly wondered why it's so popular, especially at those prices. Then I took the train to places like Galway and Kilkenny and suddenly it all made sense. That's where you find the Ireland most people are hoping to experience. Historic castles, colorful villages, dramatic coastal scenery, and a much more relaxed atmosphere. So for me, Dublin is worth a stop for a day or two when you first arrive, especially if you want to see the Guinness Storehouse, which is basically a very well done brewery tour and the most visited attraction in the country. But beyond that, the list of must-see sites is actually pretty thin, especially compared to cities like London or even Edinburgh. A couple of the other top attractions are things like a 9th century book at Trinity College and a historic jail, which are interesting but not exactly the kinds of highlights most people travel for. Dublin is a pleasant place and the pub scene can be a lot of fun, even if it's a bit expensive, but your time is usually much better spent exploring the rest of Ireland. Smaller towns have more charm, more scenery, and often much better value. Even Galway, which is a decent-sized city, felt more interesting and much more relaxed than Dublin to me. So by all means visit Dublin, just don't make it your only stop in Ireland. Next up is Milan, Italy, and this one might surprise some people as well. Before you go, you probably know that Milan is the center of Italy's fashion industry and home to many of the country's biggest banks, but unless you're a fashion model or a banker, neither of those things really matter as a visitor. When you arrive, Milan feels like a huge, busy city, and honestly, it doesn't feel that Italian compared to other places in the country. Part of that is historical. Milan was actually part of Austria not that long ago, so the architecture and overall feel are just a bit different from what many visitors expect in Italy. Now, like Brussels, Milan does have a couple of worthwhile sights if you're passing through. The cathedral is impressive, and the famous indoor shopping gallery next to it is worth a quick look. And if you plan well in advance, this is also where you can see the Last Supper in person, but tickets can be hard to get. But once you've seen those, your time is usually much better spent elsewhere. Instead, I'd head to Florence, which is a far more satisfying place to visit with world-class art, architecture, and a much more classic Italian atmosphere. There are actually lots of great alternatives across Italy. I've covered some of those in another video I'll link below, but the main point here is that just because a city is famous and huge doesn't mean it's the best place to spend your time. Next up is Frankfurt, Germany, and some of this will sound familiar. One of the first things many people learn about Frankfurt is that it's home to one of Europe's busiest airports, so it's natural to assume there must be a good reason to spend time there. And there is, just not for tourism. Frankfurt is the main financial hub of what used to be West Germany, and it's also the home base of Lufthansa, so it's a very important city economically, but tourism is really an afterthought. I spent a few days in Frankfurt years ago when I had a German rail pass, and it's a pleasant enough place, but there just aren't many sights to speak of. Much of the city was destroyed in World War II, so there's not a lot of historic character left either. So even if you land in Frankfurt, I'd recommend heading straight to the train station at the airport and going somewhere more interesting. Munich is an easy choice, and from there you could even continue on to Salzburg, Austria for a couple of days. There are actually tons of great places to visit in Germany. I'll probably do a full video on that, but Frankfurt would barely make the list. Frankfurt is a great place to connect, just not really a great place to stay. Next up is Oslo, Norway, which is another large European city that you'd probably be impressed by if you visited, but in this case there's a clear and better alternative if you want to get the most out of a trip to Norway. Like Switzerland, Norway is really known for its natural beauty, especially the fjords along the long western coast, and Oslo isn't in that area at all. Also like Switzerland, Norway is expensive, so it's not really a place you want to linger without a clear plan. The good news is that Bergen is on the west coast, and it's the main gateway to fjord tours and sightseeing. It's also a much more charming city with a beautiful historic harbor area that's great for visitors. So if you've only got time for one stop in Norway, I'd choose Bergen and skip Oslo. And if you've got a little bit more time, you could even connect the two with something like the self-guided Norway in a Nutshell route, which takes you through some of the best scenery in the country along the way. The last one on the list is Helsinki, Finland, and this one might be a bit controversial because the alternatives aren't even in Finland. Over the years, I've made a point of visiting most of the major cities in Europe because if I'm going to give travel advice like this, I feel like I should see them for myself. And I don't regret visiting any of them, but to me, Helsinki is one of the most forgettable of the larger European capitals. If you go, you'll probably enjoy a couple of days there. It's clean, it's well organized, and like many cities on this list, it's also quite expensive. But somehow, Helsinki is another one of those places without many standout attractions or even a famous cuisine that people travel for. So instead, I'd look at cities like Copenhagen or Stockholm, or even both. They're more visually striking, with more memorable sights and a stronger overall experience for visitors. Helsinki might be a great place to live, especially if you like that northern climate, but when it comes to tourism, it just doesn't quite measure up. So those are 7 large and famous European cities that you can skip or at least spend less time in, and where to go instead. The main idea here isn't that any of these places are bad, it's just that when you're planning a trip to Europe, your time is limited and some cities give you a much better experience than others. If you want more details on these and other destinations, I've got a full article on priceoftravel.com that goes along with this video, and I'll link that below. And if you're thinking about Italy in particular, I've also done another video of some of the best places to visit there, including a few great alternatives to Milan, so be sure to check that out next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.